You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask Drone U. As always, my name is Paul.
My name's Rob. Thank you for joining us. Grateful that you're spending a few minutes of your day with us. And we're going to get very practical today with this question.
Yeah, we are going to get practical. Before we get practical, though, this is, I think, going to be an exciting time. We've got a couple of newer drones coming out this time frame. I'm sure by the time this show airs, you'll already see it, but the DJI Neo that's coming out and HoverCam, which a lot of people kind of blew off, launched two new drones as well, very similar to the DJI Neo. These are all sub 250 gram drones. And the reason I bring this up, Rob, is that we've talked about this for years and years and years, that at some point in time, there would be this micro drone push, this push to get micro drones in the hands of more people, because the smaller and more convenient that we have these drones, the more people that are going to use them. And honestly, that might open up the drone world to a new kind of cohort of people. It might influence regulations. It might influence the lack therein. It might influence kind of a lackadaisical approach to the whole thing, because micro drones simply are not regulated like many other small unmanned aircraft systems.
Yeah, the goal at this point is get it under 250 grams. Period.
I mean, I really think that that is it. And it's going to be really interesting too. You know, we're still in this like limbo zone of, is there going to be a DJI ban or not? Man, I think it would be political suicide for some of these people to, you know, have a DJI ban. I mean, it would really hurt a lot of the industry as a whole. And I just don't think that the domestic manufacturers are there yet. And so, you know, the push for micro, you know, at what point do they get recategorized as toys? And then it's like, well, is it really a military company at that point?
I think a lot of people already consider them toys.
I think you're right.
I think there's probably more people in that camp, even at this point.
Yeah, I think
they
you're
just
right.
don't know. But
I think you're right.
anyways, it's going to be fun to see this new one coming out.
Yeah, and then HoverCam launches the Hover Air X1 and the X1 Pro, which is, these are, you know, these drones don't even have remotes. Like, they're all operated, that would scare me personally, but they're all operated by hand gestures. What happens if you get the camera lens dirty? And then they're operated too by various, I think they're even saying that they're voice operated now, which is really, really interesting.
That's interesting because that is such, well, I mean, obviously there's been transcription for a long time, but in terms of like AI, the voice side of it's pretty darn new.
Yeah, no, well, it is. You know, I think I can't remember if the Snapchat drone, a lot of people forget about that little thing that came out, the Snapchat drone. I was talking about it with Trent Sigurd from Autarian out in Washington this last week, and he goes, you know, that was my favorite micro drone. He goes, it actually worked really, really well.
And it was voice activated or voice?
No, I don't think it was, but it was like motion controlled, like gesture controlled.
Like you wear a glove or something? How does that?
No, you just wear your hand.
Wear your hand.
I'm just saying you use your hand. That's all. So like gesture, like you do this, you do that. You know,
how far away can it get from your hand?
That's a very good question. I think there was a limitation on distance, but I don't remember.
You've got a range of 7.5 feet.
I mean, I think it was like only 30 feet or something like that. Seriously. So, but this was like a follow me drone. This was like a.
So then you're okay.
You know, think about these new micro drones are trying to appease the social crowd,
which is cool. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
more people.
There's a lot of money in influencing.
There's a lot of money in influencing, and there's a lot of money in selling more drones.
This is true. This is true.
And it's just a technology that's not going anywhere, whether it's DJI or somebody else.
This is also
doing
true.
Too many good things.
This is true. Let's get into today's show, though, which is about upgrading your computing needs and how the market for various drone jobs has kind of changed what computer you might go with. This question comes in from a Drone U member. Don't forget, you can ask your questions at thedroneu.com or askdroneu.com. We would absolutely love it if you ask those questions. You know, something that we just learned this last week while we were at a secret conference that a lot of the influencers were not at was how these domestic manufacturers are not putting global shutter cameras into their drones, yet they want to compete with people like DJI. And we learned something very, very interesting as to why they do this. And that would be a great example for a question to ask. Why aren't more American drones built with global shutter cameras to do better inspections, better mapping, better technical service work? So also, we've got a lot of new shows coming out regarding Part 108, the development of new regulatory systems. The FAA has a lot of plans up its sleeve. And while many people may not be paying attention, there are some things that you are going to want to make sure that you know and that you're aware of to see if it's going to fit your business. So that said, greatly appreciate everyone. Look, if you are in construction, if you are in infrastructure at all, if you are in anything that's technical, then you've got to understand drone mapping, whether it's orthomosaics or whether it's actually knowing the right acquisition plan for the right deliverable. You want to make a great 3D model, that's going to be one acquisition plan. You want to make a beautiful geo-rectified 3D model, that's going to be a very different acquisition plan. If you don't know the difference between those acquisition plans and you want to have a high value because you want to make more money in this industry, then you've got to consider attending a DroneU mapping class. This is not like the basic entry we read from a manual mapping classes like many of our competitors put out. This is actually taught from experience of mapping baseball stadiums, mapping roads, mapping bridges, and actually building one of the largest, most successful drone programs in utilities in the country. That's right. At DroneU, we teach from experience. So if you want to learn how to make maps, whether it's on desktop or whether it's in the cloud, we teach on it all. At the DroneU mapping course, you can actually go over Pix4D, Pix4D Mapper, you can go over Drone Deploy, and we also now include SiteScan. This way you understand exactly what software you want to use to get the right deliverable in the hands of your clients. Because ultimately, your ability to succeed is going to be built on your ability to scale. And if you don't build the right systems from the start, it's going to be awfully difficult for you to scale. So if you want to get a subpar class from elsewhere, I recommend it. But if you want to build a successful, scalable business from the start, then I recommend that you come to a DroneU mapping class. You can join us in colorful Colorado here this September. We've got just a few spots left for our September class. Join us for Flight Mastery to get those operational systems and standards that you're going to need to, well, avoid crashing, look like a pro, and fly confidently. So if you want to fly confidently and if you want to map confidently, you need to go to thedroneu.com and sign up for a class as soon as you can.
Good afternoon, DroneU. This is Brendan. I just started a LLC called Drone to Serve You in New York, and I'm looking to eventually expand my business. Right now, I've really been just a hobbyist and taking videos of the local area and points of interest and photos and editing them and putting them up on my various social media feeds as well as Google and such, but hopefully building my portfolio to where I can get business like real estate and aerial photos and things like that. So at this time, I've been really operating off of an iPad or an iPhone, and I want to get something for the next level. So I'm looking to see if you recommend anything for either a laptop or a MacBook type scenario, something that's portable and that I could scale up and eventually, as I make more money, get other types of systems. Any information and recommendations would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and continue this awesome work that you guys do.
Thank you very much, Brennan. We really, really appreciate it. And, this is a question. It's one of those questions that just because of the speed at which technology changes, that includes software and hardware, it's a question that sort of has to be re-answered, a minimum of every year, if not more, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a great question. I think that there's probably a lot of people that are wondering the same thing, particularly people trying to get into the drone business or even expand their drone business. I think that it's probably going to surprise you what I think certainly Paul's perspective is, because we've been kind of having to work with both for so long now But maybe that's changing a little bit, at least in terms of kind of like the split, the percentages of what we're really talking about as Windows versus Apple, right? I mean, that's our world. But yeah, what would you tell him?
I think that you've hit the nail on the head. I think that this even if you're not new, which by the way, I have to say that I greatly appreciate this question. This guy supports us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And I would say that one thing I think to really help you out looking at your Instagram, looking at your videos and whatnot, is don't be afraid to link your channels in your email and have autonomous systems to get people to like your stuff, to interact with your stuff, and also keep challenging yourself. Like looking at some of your YouTube videos and whatnot that are short, I would put them on Instagram and I would literally just like mix them with quotes, mix them with things, because people ultimately want to be related to. They want to be understood. And you can take very simple video and put relatable quotes about business, about sticking to things, and really drive a lot of attention to your channel. I know it sounds stupid and basic, but honestly, it's what's working for a lot of people. And it all comes down to consistency. So I can see that you even just posted 2 weeks ago. Don't be afraid to post more frequently. Don't be afraid to do more. When it comes to whether you're brand new or whether you're looking to upgrade your computer, the needs of drone pilots are evolving and they are changing. I mean, you literally have kind of the cohort of, I call it surveyors, I call it engineers, I would call it people who work in architecture, I would call it the very advanced users of data. And it doesn't even need to be drone data, it's just data in general. People who are using AutoCAD, people who are using Revit, people who are using, ArcGIS Pro, the software and not the online. It's the really advanced people that are still needing to use Windows-based computers.
And a lot of those folks are probably sitting at a local government desk with a big desktop.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say unless you're really involved with the government or those agencies that we just mentioned, the value for MacBook computers continues to grow and grow and grow. I mean, I hate to say it to make it analogous to vehicles again, and I tend to do that too much, but Windows is like the specialty, it's the advanced, it's not for media, it breaks a lot. It reminds me of the Space Force, where they're like in the middle, of a space mission and they're trying to get the thruster to adjust for a perfect landing, and a Microsoft Windows update comes up and shuts everyone's computers down, which if you own a Windows machine, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Unless you change the settings to keep it from doing that.
Oh, no. Oh, don't hand out that BS.
It works for me.
It doesn't work for me. Mine still wants to update. I mean, even like when it's like you want to restart your computer, it's like restart with updates, and you go into the command level and say, safe restart, and it still wants to restart with updates. No, screw that.
I got a little worked up over that. You know what? Now that you say that, I have come in like the next morning and it's totally changed because of an update that I didn't approve. So you're right. Yeah.
Well, and I think MacBook is the only one that you can truly shut it down from updating, because look at Rob. Rob has a 2016 MacBook Pro. 2015. I still think it's one of the best models, as old and out of date.
I bought this model because this is what you suggested I buy.
And I still have mine, and
it was like $450.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be editing big stuff with this.
No, you're not going to be editing photos or video, stuff. But it's reliable. And that's the car analogy, is that Windows is like the advanced. It's like the brand new twin turbo, right? That's really, it can do all these things, but how much are you really going to, use that for? Or are you going to stick with like the reliable Lexus that always works, always gets it done. It's built for scale. It's reliable. No matter what, you can trust it to work every single time. It's almost like that. And so, with the M1, the M2, even I would see the M3 MacBooks, I think they actually kind of went down a little bit in reliability. If you are looking to buy a new computer, they just launched the new MacBook M4s, or they're going to here in September. And honestly, those computers are so much better than just about anything that you can get on the Windows side if you're working with media. He mentioned, I'm using an iPad, I'm using an iPhone. look, I've seen a lot of people work with iPads, Rob, but when it comes to, scaling, when it comes to batch editing a lot of photos,
It's about efficiency.
yeah, I don't think an iPad really drives efficiency or scale.
But I do know a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but I've got several either friends or acquaintances that have adapted to using the iPad Pro and a keyboard, and they love it. But it just depends on what they're doing.
It really does. And I mean, if we're trying to answer this question to service the most amount of people and specifically drone pilots, you're typically working in media. You typically need to edit video. Now, some people would say, well, if you're working in TikTok and Instagram, you're going to be using CapCut, so you only really need an iPhone. Okay, agreed. Not going to disagree with that one. But if you're editing widescreen video format or high value, actually using decent cameras footage that's widescreen, aka 16:9, I'm probably going to be using a MacBook Pro. And I would trust MacBook Pros over a Windows machine any day of the week. I still can't believe we've got this massively powerful Alienware M16 with a 3070 Ti laptop GPU in it. And it cannot play the files from the camera that we're literally recording off of right now. Like, you have to download extra software. It still has to buffer a little bit. It doesn't
And
play.
this is just a Sony camera. This isn't like it's somehow related to Apple.
Correct. Yeah. It's just that this is a Sony full frame camera. So you're getting, 150 megabits per second. It's a little bit more detailed.
But the point is, it doesn't fit into their proprietary system, and yet it still can't play it. My Windows machine struggles
with this.
Too.
Yeah. And like the MacBooks don't. Sometimes with these newer MacBooks, the M1, M2, M3, you're going to have to download the codecs. So the files that come out of this camera are MXF or Mary X-Ray Foxtrot. And essentially it means materials exchange format, which is like Sony's proprietary UHD format. And honestly, even on a MacBook, you have to download the codec system to actually be able to play these files and make it work, but they don't stutter through the files.
Unless you have the right player. What's the player that works?
For Windows, it's VLC. But
VLC, which actually works pretty well.
Yeah. But for MacBook, you've got QuickTime. I think it's QuickTime, right? And it just plays perfectly fine. Like, it works amazing. I think if we're gonna be succinct about this argument, nowadays, if you are upgrading your computer and you're not using a desktop photogrammetry service, if you're not using engineering-based software, if you're not using super technical advanced software, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a more reliable, robust experience out of MacBook. And for some people, you simply don't want to change from the Windows to the Mac experience. And I will say that I completely understand that. I was a Windows kid in college. I did not use MacBooks. And then I switched to MacBooks like my senior year. And it was a very frustrating 3 to 4 weeks. I had a friend walk me through it. But nowadays, I absolutely cannot imagine using a Windows machine for anything media related. I mean, you even take the big editing softwares, right? You've got Avid, you've got DaVinci Resolve, you've got Adobe Premiere Pro, and then you've got Final Cut Pro, right? You can use the free version of DaVinci Resolve and do a lot, but if you really want to like make great videos, you're probably going to have the paid version. Okay, that's going to cost you. Most people, though, use Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere Pro. Why do they use those over DaVinci Resolve? DaVinci Resolve is amazing for color. It's amazing for simple editing techniques. But when it comes to actually using plugins for titles, plugins for transitions, plugins for all sorts of stuff that you want to do on screen, there is an entire ecosystem for Final Cut Pro, and there's an entire ecosystem for Premiere Pro, and I forget the name. After Effects is the program that works with Premiere Pro. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. You want to use Premiere Pro and After Effects, you pay monthly for the editing software versus I paid $350 8 years ago for Final Cut Pro, and I'm still using it to this day.
And I just saw it for $299.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Not even adjusted for inflation. That's a fantastic. That entire video that I just edited for you, that 20-minute long video, I did all on my MacBook Pro that was built in 2021. Was the last Intel one that they made. And it did it all on my little laptop machine. I did it all in Final Cut Pro. I used some Motion VFX graphics. I did all the speed ramping. I did all the color. I did all the LUTs, everything right on my little laptop, even though Jake Levesque will be like, you can't use your little MacBook to edit. I'm like, yes, I can, but thank you. Giving you a hard time, buddy. But that said, I think honestly, if you're working primarily in media and not in these super advanced verticals, the MacBook is going to be the way to go. I don't really recommend the M3. I would wait until the M4 comes out, in all honesty. I think you get more bang for your buck. But like, even if you're in construction, like for example, we just did a huge construction training for this team. They're doing mapping, but they also are trying to take their drone program further. They're trying to get really good editing, really good marketing videos from their existing drone team. And they're doing it now. But what did they do? They went out and they bought a MacBook because Windows is just not cutting it. It's not economically scalable to do media on Windows. Now, I'm sure Steve, our editor, who hasn't called me back in a week, would argue and say, Premiere Pro. Yeah, he doesn't watch these, but even if he does, I love you, buddy. Even if he uses Windows and Premiere Pro, he's so ingrained in that system that he's probably not going to want to change because it would take him months to get back into a good efficiency. So if you're not years into this, it's worth it to consider switching over to the Mac ecosystem. I'm honestly not a big fan of iPhones anymore. I hate that I have to drop $2,000 on an iPhone every 2 years. It's just it's not exciting for me, but it does work in an existing ecosystem with my laptop. I can text people from my laptop. It's easier and more convenient to work from my laptop. And at some point in time, you have to think about, what is my true goal? How to scale, factor into that equation and that formula. What deliverables am I trying to get? And if you are not doing super technical deliverables with something like Pix4D Matic Pro Survey, you got to ask yourself, why am I using a Windows machine? And that also includes things like, AutoCAD, Revit, etc. So, I mean, Rob, you know what? I just hit me. I should ask this question a while ago. Mm-hmm. You were entirely a Windows person when I met you.
So. Oh, yeah.
And now you use a MacBook all the time.
Well, I do. Actually, I am a big believer in understanding and being comfortable using both platforms. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And frankly, not the least of which is just to keep the mind sharp, like not to get so in, I'm about to philosophize.
Philosophize.
But I think that life is full of so many ruts, and this is a simple way for me to kind of make my mind work a little bit harder on a daily basis. So doing this, I'm on the Mac, and then when I'm at home, I've got my Mac out. If I go to a coffee shop or whatever, I pull the Mac out, the 2015 Mac. I'm not editing, like we said. But then when we finish this and I go back to my desk in my office and my 3 screens, it's a Windows machine.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take me any time at all to transition between the two. So I find it kind of funny when people are like, I don't want to transition and learn a new system. And okay, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I think we make things to be a big deal in our heads that are not big deals.
Yeah.
And switching between operating systems is not a big deal.
And I think that there's a lot of competitive advantage in being able to use both platforms as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's simple things that Windows sucks at, and people are just used to the suckiness. 2 examples. 1, reading PDFs. And 2, zipping files, right? If you want to extract a file in Windows, you download it and it's a zip file, and then you double click it and it's like Windows Extractor. Windows Extractor, where do you want to extract this file to, and how do you want to extract it? MacBook, double click, extract in same folder, open. Like, it's literally a magnitude of scale faster, easier, and more convenient. And I'm not pushing for MacBook on everything. It's just the basics they do better and they do easier. I mean, the other thing that I think of is, so we talked about zipping files, PDFs, right? With PDFs on a MacBook, let's say Windows, right? You want to sign a document, you use DocuSign, you use Adobe Sign, you use all these different things, and there are value adds to that. But if I have a MacBook and my end user has a MacBook too, I can just open up the PDF and preview, add my signature to the document, click save, and send it right back to them, and I'm done, and I don't have to pay for more software. I mean, like there are very small. All right, now I'm starting to feel a little too passionate about MacBooks and Windows.
Well, there are a lot of ways. You might have to do a little bit more research, I think, because there are more options, but you can do things like that for free in Windows as well. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think the bottom line for Brendan is for what he's describing he wants to do, he's probably going to be best served with some sort of a MacBook.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's probably going to be the most efficient workflow for you. It's going to last you the longest, most likely. And I think ultimately would make him the most, if we're getting down to it, effective and therefore profitable, right? So I think that's the bottom line of what we're trying to say.
100%. 100%. I honestly think that's going to wrap it up here for us, because ultimately it comes down to what problems are you trying to solve? What's the easiest, most scalable and efficient means of solving that problem? And I think for a vast majority of use cases, MacBooks make things easier. Period. End of story. But there's a lot of use cases where MacBooks simply do not work. So
yeah,
I think that's gonna...
Nothing's perfect for everything.
That is true. And you can't make everyone happy. On that bombshell, that's going to do it for us today. If you have a question, ask droneu.com, whether it's drone delivery, whether it's drone businesses, whether it's the reality of the market at hand. One of the conversations, and we haven't really talked about this, and I would love to hear questions on this, is how a lot of the market when it comes to drones has gone to military, has gone to weaponization. And I think there's a lot of opinions out there. Yeah, even with Rob and his grunting right now. Look, I'm no gorilla, but I understand that language.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, like, I'd love to hear those questions. It's things that we want to talk about. Bring those questions in. Ask@droneu.com. Thanks for joining us.